this is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is going to be episode 345 of Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy, and so much is going on. We are getting so close to Dare to Be Great 2, October 6th through the 9th. If you haven't registered, make sure to head out there and register. It's going to be withinthetrenches.net/conference. All the information will be on there. Keynote speakers, conference speakers, industry partners that are taking part in the vendor hall sessions. It is all there. Once again, withinthetrenches.net/conference, and you can register for free. And that'll be October 6th through the 9th. We have 20 conference speakers. There are 3 keynotes, and then about 10 or 12 industry partners that are taking part in the vendor hall session. So again, make sure to check that out with withinthetrenches.net/conference. A big thanks goes out to all of the patrons. Thank you very much. I wouldn't be able to do everything that I do without all of you, as well as the sponsors, and of course, all of you who watch and listen and support. So thank you so much. I'm excited for this episode. We have been talking, I was just talking with my guest a little bit ago. The first email when we started talking about doing an episode together was almost a year ago now. So we've been talking about this. We were trying to get an episode going, and both of our schedules just kept going different places. And then with the pandemic and everything has just been crazy. So we are finally going to be doing this episode, and I'm so excited. This is going to be fun because there's going to be some interesting stuff that we're going to be talking about. Every episode is interesting, but this one is a little bit different. And again, I'm excited. And my guest today is Roxy, and she's director with Lyon County Emergency Communications Center.
Hi, Ricardo. Hi, everybody.
How's it going?
It's great.
Excellent. Now, like I was saying, it's almost a year now. It was like October 18th, 2019 when we first started talking. And this started out as a suggestion on, who might be good to bring on and all. But then reading through your notes and then reading them again and having you on here, yes, finally, we're going to do this because you've got some interesting stories. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I mean, how did you get started in public safety to begin with?
No pressure. This has been a year in the making. I better bring it.
Yeah.
So I listen to your podcast, and I don't have a great story. I've done a terrible job. I needed a new job.
Mm-hmm.
That's what brought me to my dispatch center that I direct now. I started in 2005 as a telecommunicator. I worked my way through to training. We did a lot of public education. So that was my primary focus, was training and public education when I was here the first time.
Mm-hmm.
In 2009, my husband and I got a harebrained idea to move to the Great White North, and we packed up our 2003 white Ford Explorer with all of our belongings, and we drove to Alaska. So I started with the Alaska State Troopers in 2010, and I worked there until 2014. And then we came home because my mother was ill and I needed to be home with her. I was able to spend the last couple of years with her before she died. So,
wow. So the county that you're working at is where you started then, right?
Yeah, I took over directing my home center in 2018. So definitely kind of a full circle dispatch story. It makes me very proud to be a director of individuals that I've worked alongside. So I know their strengths, I know their weaknesses, I know how to grow them because I've worked with them. So it gives me, I think, a really good perspective on how far I can push people, how people need to be supported. So I really enjoy it. They're a great group. So I'm a pretty lucky girl.
That's good to have that, really the camaraderie already, because you were there in the beginning,
Yeah.
you leave and then you come back. And that says a lot to come back to the area. Of course you said because of your mom and all, but also going back to that center, there are a lot of times where when people leave a center, even if it was good, sometimes they don't go back to the same
Yeah.
one. They might go to a different place, but that says a lot, you going back and doing more and, becoming the director there and all. But what was it like for you in the beginning? So do you come from a public safety background or were you completely green?
No, I was completely green.
Mhm.
My mom for a long time thought I did secretarial work, that's terrible in the dispatch land. But no, I was completely green. I had never, I didn't really know what I was getting into. I dated and I'm now married to a man who worked in the jail, and he's like, you talk a lot, you're kind of bossy. I think you'd be a really good dispatcher. So who would have thunk? So I just applied, not really having a ton of expectation. So
Mhm. And then so you apply. What is that process like? Because every center seems to have a different one. I mean, there of course are some little similarities, but when you went in, did they have you do like a sit along at first? Was there like a panel interview, or what was it like for you? What was the process?
so we have a pretty high standard and have from the beginning. So we came in for 2 interviews. We took a written test. We did a psychological exam. So there was definitely some steps. We do less now, actually, but they definitely put you through the paces to get you hired on here.
Now, when you got hired in, like for myself with the last dispatch center that I worked at, where I finished off my career was at Allegan County. It was the county that I grew
Mhm.
up in, and so I knew a lot of the West Side and everything. But when I went in there, I had those 2 interviews. I had a written test as well, and that I remember the second interview, I went through it, and well, let me say this part first. The first interview, I went through all the questions and everything, and then I remember them saying, do you have any questions for us? And I pulled out of my inside pocket this little paper pad just full of questions. And I remember they were blown away by that. And I thought, why is that such a big deal? And and they were kind of chuckling and they're like, okay, hit us with it. And then at the end I said, was that not good for me to have all these questions? And they said, no, we've just never had anyone do that before. And
I
it
would
just
have hired you on the spot. Like,
well,
you're
that
hired.
yeah, that's kind of what they were saying. Like really were into this. You had invested the time and everything, and had all these questions. So that second interview, when I went in, it was really just kind of a cleanup type interview
Sure.
where I just went in and we were just buttoning up a few things, and they said, "Well, you've got the job," and I said, "I'm what? I did." And I said, "How many other people?" And they said, "You were the only one that we chose." And I said, "Oh, for real?" I was like, "That's pretty awesome." So, I get through that. Now, I already had experience, okay, from when I was working in Florida, but when I walked in that first day, ooh, there were way more screens. There were more people that were working on at the same time, and it was a little overwhelming at first because I'm seeing all of this, and it's just so different. So, for you, was it the same? Were you a little overwhelmed when you walked in? Like, what were you looking at for
You
those
know,
who are watching and all?
when you were explaining that, that kind of reminded me of when I moved to Alaska and
Mhm.
applied there. I thought, well, shoot, I have experience. This should be money. I got it.
Yeah,
And I walked into a completely different world. So I really feel that because, I didn't know. I thought all dispatcher centers were kind of the same,
right.
and when in actuality they're vastly different. So I walked into a whole new world. So that was definitely me part 2.
So when you go into the center that you're working at now, that first time,
Mhm.
what is it that you're looking at? Like, how many screens are there? Like, what is going on? Do you remember that first day walking in?
I thought it was kind of like what I envisioned NASA to look like, because there were 8 screens and you had this big, like, major chair that you got to sit in, and there were so many keyboards, and there was so much to look at. So I think and I try to remember that now when I hire new people, it's really overwhelming just to sit down at the chair. For us, we take that for granted because that's what we see every day. But that's a lot of stimulation to somebody who's not used to it. Definitely.
Right. Yeah. When I went in there, see, when I first started out, it was just myself for 8 hours, and we had a couple screens, a couple different radios, and one main phone system, of course. Well, two, the 911, and then our 10-digit line, our admin lines.
Right.
But it was nothing compared to walking into the county into central dispatch, and just seeing everyone moving so fast. And because I can picture myself moving fast when the shit's hitting the fan, when it was just me by myself, but being in there and thinking about working it all as a team and listening to so many different things, I just remember just kind of there, like, Ricardo, come on, we're going to show you the training room and this and that. I'm like, okay.
Well, and I think that's something that kind of struck me too, is how they moved as a unit.
Yeah.
I think you go into every dispatch center and you kind of can pick that up, how the group works together and how they function, and it's not just one call being dispatched by one person. It's the whole unit making it happen. So definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to learn how to listen to everything.
Yeah.
You've got you're on the phone. For myself, I'm not sure how you guys do it there. If do you do all disciplines?
We do all disciplines.
Okay.
We pick up for all emergency throughout the county, and we both call, take, and dispatch. So we do everything.
And then how many do you have on at a time?
I have 2. I'd really like to have 3, but that seems to be a white elephant that nobody can ever get to.
Yeah, and so our minimum was 3, and then on the weekends we would have 4. We had a 5th console, which was supposed to be the supervisor console, but I mean, we would have 2 on this side for phones, and then on the other side was our NCIC and our main radios, and then the 5th one was the one that was kind of up front, so it would go kind of go around like that, almost like a horseshoe.
Yeah.
But it was only if we had like a real bad storm or a big incident that was going on that we would usually have that console filled in as well. But yeah, man, I've been out of dispatch for 7 years now, and I still have that dispatch ear where I'm sitting somewhere. Well, not so much now because of COVID, but when I would sit in a restaurant or something, I would be able to hear conversations from like 2 tables down, and or
you're in Walmart and you hear that person and you're like, turn, go this way. Yeah, you can hear them.
The voices. You know the people. I would say to my brother, I'm like, dude, did you just hear that? He's like, what are you talking about?
Right.
What are you listening to? I'm like, nothing. I'm sorry, forget it.
We're weird. It's okay.
Yeah, it's like, let me be here at the table right now. My bad, dude. I hear other things going on and I can't help it. It's hard to turn it off.
Right.
So then what about your training? For my center, we had 4 different phases, and we would start out on phones and then on NCIC and then radio, and then that 4th stage was our shadow phase, where it was just me, and then my trainer would be on the other side of the room, and I was working with the entire team.
That's pretty similar to how I started out. Is we were assigned to trainers and then worked through phases, and then your last phase was kind of the shiny penny, shine you up, send you on your way.
Yeah.
Then we were always placed with, the goal was that we would always be placed with a veteran dispatcher for a couple of months after we got kicked out. But you know how staffing works, and it ended up being 2 new hires on second shift in the middle of the summer. And that, didn't really work out so great. So we just sort of found our way.
Yeah. I remember when I finished training, I think I got forced in twice over the weekend for overtime.
Welcome.
Yeah. Welcome to dispatch. We were pretty short staff at the time, but the team that I ended up working with, when we had someone new come on, they would do like 1-to-1 shifts, so they could work, the part of that morning, and then in the evening. And that's what I was doing in the beginning. But then after that, they just put me with a team in the mornings, and it was the most seasoned team of veteran dispatchers and call takers. And man, did they show me what was up. But
It's
I
hard to
learned
break
fast.
in. Yeah, it's hard to break into the seasoned group. I think that that's the true test of whether a new dispatcher is going to last, is if they can find a way to get that common ground with old timers. They're tough.
Oh yeah, they were hardcore, man. And one of them, her name was Carol, and she could drink coffee like a mofo. And I remember one time trying to keep up with her, and I got to my third cup, and I was flying. And she's like, "Come on, keep up with me." And I'm like, "You're on your second pot of coffee by yourself. Like, I can't do this." Like, people are going to call in the 911 and wonder why I'm stuttering and freaking out, and it's because of all the caffeine that I have in me.
Peer pressure.
Yeah, but it was fun. I think what helped me was my sense of humor with all of them, and the
Yeah.
dark humor as well. And we were able to work, and it ended up working out very well for me. So then, you go through your training and all, and you start off on your own. Now, do you remember your first call by any chance, or any early calls?
I remember my first 911 call, and
Mhm.
it was basically like that's the last little section of training that I did. And I didn't want to, I was super scared. I don't want to take a 911 call. No. Well, I don't want to take a 911 call. And they were all saying, "Oh, it'll be fine. It'll probably be a misdial. Just don't be a baby. Pick it up. Tonight you're going to do it. Tonight you're going to pick it up." Well, I'm like, okay, it's probably going to be a misdial. Yeah, it turned out to be a baby not breathing. So they were a bunch of big liars.
Oh man.
And the people who had called us had just moved to the area, so they didn't know their address. And of course, they lived way out in the county, way to the north of town. Um, so yeah, they're big liars. But it did turn out well. I was able to get through EMD and have my first real save, 7 months old. And right as she started breathing again, the officer pulled up and it was all great. So
Oh man, those are rare calls.
yeah,
Do something
yeah.
like that, and you get the child or person or whoever, to start breathing again, for them to come out of it. I remember when I first started in Florida, I went to a 40-hour beginners dispatchers training academy type thing. And
Mhm.
when we were there, and the statistics have probably changed by now, but I remember, and I will never forget this, but I remember the guy who was there telling us, if you're giving CPR instructions, there's a 5% chance that that person is going to come back.
Yeah,
And I just remember sitting there thinking, damn, like, what am I getting into here? But
yeah,
I loved it. I loved doing the job. I loved all of it. It was really good. And you ended up, taking that one, and just, you said it was in the last chunk of your training, right?
yeah. They were basically like, "Okay, you pass, you're out. Go for it.
Yeah.
You're done."
Yeah. You did this one, and yeah, that's awesome to have that, because it could have gone the other way. But I
Very
think
easily.
I think just because of what I know of you, and just listening to you talk, I think if it had gone the other way, we would still be having this conversation now,
Yeah.
because you obviously enjoy what you're doing.
I've never had a job, like, people have asked me, "Why do you stay in 911 for all these years? Why do you go back?" I've had a couple of hiatuses to do other things, and, it's the only job I've ever had that made me feel like I was worth something, that made me feel like I had something to give others. I'm a fixer. I come from a family of fixers. We want to help. And this is the only job where I've ever felt worthy. And I just always kept coming back because that feeling I never got from other places. So,
That's awesome. That's why I love it so much as well. When I left dispatch to work in the private side within digital, I think what helped me was the fact that they continued to support me doing the podcast, because that's how they found me, was through the podcast.
Right.
And because I was going out and I was training dispatchers and call takers on the different, things that they had. So I was able to quench my thirst, so to speak, for dispatch by going to
Right.
different centers. I would sit there sometimes and just listen. And they would say, "What are you doing, man?" I'm like, "I'm just listening to the room, just listening to what's going on, because I feel like I'm home." I
Just filling
feel
up your cup. Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But there would be times where the phone would be ringing, and man, I would want to get up and go and answer the phone. And there have been
Yeah.
times where I've gone back to the center that I used to work for. And the most recent time that I was there, I was in there and I heard the phone ringing, and one of them turned and looked at me and they said, "You want to answer it, don't you?" I was like, "Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I want to jump back in."
It's hard. It's definitely hard to leave for sure.
Mhm.
I left once. Two of my former coworkers had died in Alaska. They were killed in the line of duty. And I was working here
Mhm.
I had just come back home. So I was working here full time, and it was hard for me to balance safety. I was overly safe because I was obsessive about safety checks and things like that. And it got to a point where I had to, just for my own sanity and for everyone else's sanity, I stepped away for a little while to
Mhm.
work a job in the private sector, but I did still do part-time. But yeah, having stepped away, you just always are pulled back. You always want to come back. So I definitely understand
Sure.
that.
So you work those years at the center that you're at, and then, like you said, you get this idea to go to Alaska. How long did it take in that process when you got there and you applied and everything? How long did it take for you to actually get that position then?
Well, okay, so funny story. I actually worked for an electric company in the interim while I was trying to get settled and apply for different dispatch jobs there.
Mhm.
And I had gotten a job with the airport police in Fairbanks. I had given my notice to the electric company that I was quitting in 2 weeks. A week and a half into my 2 weeks, I got a call back for an interview with the state troopers. And I'm like, look, I can't not have a job. So if this is for real, we've got to speed it along. So I
Right.
basically came in, interviewed. They were like, you have experience, you're hired. And I started within that week and a half. So it was very quick.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that's pretty awesome then.
Yeah. And that's totally not normal. But I mean, I was the only breadwinner at the time. And
Mhm.
so I couldn't be without work. And they were really great about speeding it up. So
That's pretty cool. They
yeah.
obviously saw and knew that you needed it and they needed it, so like, let's do this. So,
Let's make it happen. Yeah, it was the greatest thing ever. It's honestly the honor of my life to be selected to work there. It was a dream come true for sure.
oh man. So okay, so I've got some notes here from our email exchange, because so you had mentioned how you said not only do you have to understand dispatching for humans, you have to understand wildlife enforcement and hunting laws. I had
Yeah.
zero idea what I was walking into. Tell me about this.
Well, God bless the Alaska wildlife troopers
Mhm.
because you basically have to understand human law and animal law. Alaska is huge in hunting, which everybody's probably aware. There's a lot of subsistence laws that apply to Native Alaskans. There are different seasons that you have to be aware of. You have to be aware of how long moose antlers need to be before they can be shot and harvested.
Wait,
Wi-
hold on a minute. Hold on. Let's rewind a minute.
yeah,
You have to know this? Like,
yeah, because people would call you and say,
right?
"Hey, somebody has shot this moose, and I think it's illegal because the antlers are too short." So you have
Oh,
to know that's a
okay.
thing.
Yeah,
Um, it's amazing how many little intricacies there are in hunting, where people can hunt, what sections of land they can hunt. We have a lot of land that is federal, so it was covered by the Bureau of Land Management. So those are whole different rules.
right.
So lot of things to learn, and I didn't really know anything past deer. That's all we have in Kansas. So
Right.
it's definitely a learning curve for sure.
Yeah, and Michigan, it was the same thing. DNR kind of rules around there, and we would have people during hunting season that would call up. I remember one guy specifically. I'll never forget this because my jaw was dropped as he was telling me this, and then I had to tell him, "You can't do that, man." So he goes, "You think you can send an officer out to my address?" Ended up hitting a deer, and I said, "You hit a deer at your address?" And because he wanted a roadkill permit so that he could take it home for
Mhm.
the meat. And he said, "Well, no, I hit it a few miles away." And I said, "Okay, but and you're already home? You brought it home?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, I already skinned it, cut it up, and did everything.
No,
I need the report." And I said, "Okay, one, you're not supposed to do that, sir. I mean,
no.
are you okay?" And he's like, "I'm fine, he just kind of hit the side of my car. It's good." And I mean, I asked him that first, of course, but he he's telling me this, and I said, "Well, the DNR's got to go out there. Is probably going to go out there with the officer." And he goes, "Did I do something wrong?" And I'm like, "Dude, you're not supposed to do that, man. Like,
No.
you have the permit first. You got to have somebody come out and have the permit first, and all this other stuff." And I think DNR took the meat. If I remember correctly, they took it, and
Yeah.
they're like, "Sorry, you messed up. It's either that or we give you a fine." And he gave up that meat and stuff. But we didn't have to know anything about like antlers and such. But ooh, that's pretty interesting.
Whole
That
new world.
you have to
Yeah, whole
know.
new
Yeah,
world.
dang. But that's interesting. No, that's pretty cool because I didn't know that. Um, what are some other things that I guess that happened while you were there that I guess you wouldn't have in Kansas?
Well, the big one in my area, if somebody calls here and
Mhm.
calls for the fire department, "Oh, my house is on fire." There are tons of places where I lived in Fairbanks that are not fire service areas, so you can't send anyone. If your house is burning down and you live in a non-fire service area, you have to see if maybe they have a hose, if they have some water storage, but if they don't, their house burns down. And that's terrible when you're a dispatcher and you're like your natural
Right.
instinct is to help. There's
Yes.
nothing you can do. So that's a big one. I think just the sheer logistics of having 10 towns and 45 villages on two different land masses to send help. You're talking 3.5 hours, sometimes by boat. They had to get places, sometimes by plane. So you were dealing with flight times. If people were out of flight times, we weren't going to that village. If the ferry had stopped running due to weather, we aren't going to that village. So it's a real helpless feeling when you're sitting in the dispatch center and your natural inclination is to try to get these people some help. In 2020, that's not, calling 911 and receiving help is not something that happens everywhere in this nation. And I think that that's something that people don't quite understand. People are not as blessed in other areas as we are here in the continental US. So,
Well, I can't even imagine how many calls that you took where, I mean, you remain on the line with someone until somebody gets there. But
yeah.
how does that work now when you've got someone who's 2 to 3 hours away? You remain on the line, or do you continue? I mean,
Well,
that's
it kind of depends on the scenario. I'll
yeah.
give you two examples. We
Okay.
had a woman who had a hunting cabin with her husband. They were out walking in the kind of a wooded area in front of a lake. Her husband, unfortunately, was mauled by a bear, and she ran back to the cabin. Her husband did not follow because he had expired,
Mhm.
and we talked to her for 4.5 hours until we could get someone there with her because the gun she had in the cabin was jammed. So if that bear would have breached that door, she would have had no way to defend herself at all. So we just felt like it was for her safety and for us to just know what was happening to keep that line open. So it was 4 dispatchers, 2 shifts, 4 hours that we spoke to her. Bravest woman I've ever met. Once we had a hunting trip for Dall sheep in the Denali National Park area, where they had gone up a pretty sizable mountain climb, and it was an older gentleman and his like late 40s, early 50s son. They got to kind of this flat area where they took a break, and the son had had a heart attack. And so we had, luckily, an aircraft that was close, but it was fall, it was very rainy, and the cloud ceiling was just, it was so low, and they could see the helicopter trying to get them, but the helicopter couldn't see them through the clouds. So I had to tell that man, the elderly man, like, you're going to have to spend the night there. We can't get your son out. So we're going to have you hang up so you can keep your cell phone battery. We're going to check on you at 3:00 and at 5:00 and at 7:00. And we want to keep your cell phone as best we can. So there are times when you would hang up, and there were times where you had to stay with them just for safety.
Oh man, I can't even imagine this whole scenario. Everything that you're saying, everything that you guys had that you all had to do. Now, with staying on the phone that long, now does that mean also that in the area the call volume isn't as high?
Yeah, and then I wouldn't say that. The call volume's still pretty high.
Is it? Okay.
Like when we were on the phone with the lady at the bear mauling, that was second shift. We still dispatched for a large metro portion of the city of Fairbanks, so we were getting pretty consistent calls during swing shift. So, there were times where we would say, we're going to put you on hold for a second, but we'll come right back and check on her. But just keeping that line open so we could help the other dispatchers.
See, and that's why I was asking about the call volume, because, sometimes you would probably be able to stay on with that person the entire time, or like you were saying, just go back and forth. Put them on hold, answer the other calls, and cycle through everyone there. And now, is that one of the things that you did? Did you stay on with that person the whole time, and switching back and forth, or did you cycle through different dispatchers as it was going on?
We kept dispatchers with her as long as we could on a shift. So she had somebody from day shift for quite a while, and then she had a couple of us through swing shift because we were trying to help her with her gun. Other useless knowledge Alaska dispatchers have to have guns. And then she transitioned to me for the rest of the night because I was going to be there. But we tried to keep somebody with her that she could develop a rapport with, and just feel comfortable with in a really crappy situation. So,
man, that is something else, because in the area of Michigan where I was dispatching, we never had any issues with bears. So that's another one there. I remember I talked to someone early on. My former co-host and I, we were talking to a person out of Canada. And she says, one of the things, because I think we were asking her about, similarities and differences. And she goes, one of the things that, that you all deal with probably a lot, that is a nuisance, are dogs that are in the yard. She goes, and for us, it's bears. It's nothing with dogs. It's bears all the time. And Whitney and I, we were sitting there like, do you hear that?
Yeah. Moose for us. You always could tell when there were new families that came to the military installations, because we would get that call more, that there's a moose in my yard, or there's a bear in my yard. What do I do? Yeah, you just let them keep going. You're in their house. You're in their house.
Yeah, they own the land. Just leave them be.
Yep.
Oh man. Now, one of the other things that you had mentioned early on when we were first talking about this, about doing an episode, was that there was a fight in one of the villages, and this was on the border of Alaska and Canada, and it was snowing really hard, and the nearest trooper was about 3 hours away. So, the individual, there was a person who was tearing up the house. The female who was calling was scared and all, and the village chief had to look for like upstanding community members. So is that kind of how it goes down? Like they got to call out and look for other people that are there until someone can show up?
Well, in some villages, like that's
Mhm.
part of the training too. You have to be really aware of the dynamic in your village. So I could call that village chief and say, hey, got this going down the way. Can you get a couple people until the trooper can arrive? And he was great about that. It's just constantly thinking outside the box of how you, the dispatcher, can solve the situation. The trooper was coming by car in a blizzard. They live there. They know that's just what it is. But
Right.
it goes back to saying that people here think calling 911 you get instantaneous help. That's not the case there. So they definitely try to work with law enforcement the best they can. But I think that there are some times that I think we have to come to the realization that in 2020 some changes are going to have to be made to
Right.
get folks who live off the grid a little bit better service. But the weather and just the sheer logistics, it's tough.
Man. So talking about that, I want to play something here really quick. There's something that you had told me about. Now, this was a show I remember seeing previews for this, and I never got a chance to watch it. But there was it was a gas station, right, that exploded.
Mhm. Yeah.
Let me play this first little snippet here.
Fairbanks 33.
Like something advised, there were 5 people running from the building at the time of explosion.
Holy crap.
So who was that?
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
Um,
that was you, right?
yeah, that was me.
That was you on the radio there.
Yeah.
What happened with this? Like I was watching some of this, but I wanted to play that clip there. One, because it was you, of course. But this just in the intro as well of this episode, for those who are watching and listening, this was Alaska State Troopers. This was season 3, episode 11, and it's called Helter Skelter Homicide. But it's talking about this gas station explosion in the beginning here. So what exactly happened with this?
So, one of the major highways that gets Fairbanks people to Anchorage is called the Parks Highway.
Mhm.
Cantwell is a little village or town that sits right in the middle of that trip. So Cantwell was a gas station stop for a lot of people. They had a Chevron that had really big food stuff, and we had a tremendous snowstorm all day long. It just dumped snow, and people were having a really hard time traversing the Parks Highway. And we had a lot of our kids coming from the north going to Anchorage area for hockey stuff. So we were getting constant calls along the way. Is the road closed? Is the road closed? So we were talking to the clerk at that Chevron for quite a while because she was relaying the people who had stopped there, the road conditions up ahead. And I had spoken to her just maybe 5 minutes before I got the first call from this. They had gotten a new pizza oven and they were smelling some weird smells, but they couldn't quite figure out where it was coming from. They had gone downstairs to adjust some of the levels of the propane that fed the pizza oven, and it exploded. So the whole gas station caught on fire. There were minor injuries. That show does kind of lean on the side of dramatic, but there were some pretty serious injuries. That clerk was pretty beloved by everyone in the town, and she had to go to Seattle. Any major hospitalizations, you get flown to Seattle. So she was there for quite some time, but just the sheer logistics of getting help somewhere it was 2-3 hours in both directions. So I remember calling the first troopers on scene and just saying, just listen to what I'm about to say on the radio. Just whoop. And I was giving it out, and they're like, oh, on the way. But they all lived around the corner from that gas station, so they could just run and try to help people get out. So it was a big deal.
Yeah. And it looks like it, because just in the beginning of that intro, they show what the gas station looks like, and people just kind of walking around. And this of course is after a lot of the fire is already kind of died down there.
Yeah.
But man, that looked pretty crazy.
Yeah, it happened at 11, like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. It was late. But all volunteer fire stations along that road. So we had to work to get people up and dressed and in their trucks. So it was a big deal. We did win an award for that. So I guess we did a good job, but
Oh, well done.
nobody perished in it. It very easily could have gotten a lot worse. So
Right. Now, with them being, volunteer and all, what was the response time then still long? Because you were mentioning how, there was still 2 hours or and such. Were they coming from that far, or are these other responders?
So they have a small fire department within the town
Uh-huh.
that was coming from about 30 miles away, but it was like a handful of guys. So real fire engines, big fire trucks were
Yeah,
both several hours away.
gotcha. Now, from what you can remember or even tell me, are those, let's say, the cruisers as well as the fire trucks and all, are they set up a certain way with their wheels to be able to get through a lot of the snow that's there? I mean,
Um,
are
yeah,
they built
yeah.
different, or?
Well, I mean, they have chains. They have what they need to drive along the highways. So a lot of our wildlife troopers carry chains for their truck. They're going very high on the Dalton and Elliott highways. Ice road truckers. That's all them. But yeah, the chains. They try to equip them with really good vehicles for travel, because travel's tough in Alaska just for normal people. So
Right. Yeah. No. And so I just ask because, being in Michigan, like we get a lot of snow there, nothing like Alaska, but I just remember driving through blizzard like weather, and I didn't have, like, my tires were pretty much bald. My own fault. But I
yeah,
remember praying that I would make it into dispatch. And there was a snow plow that I passed by that was tipped on its side in the ditch, and the driver was standing on top of it on his phone. And I remember kind of freaking out and white knuckling it even more and thinking, Lord, if this person can't make it and they're in that big of a truck and they're supposed to be putting, salt down or plowing and all this other stuff, how am I going to make it? Please help me make it, because I need to get to dispatch and help everyone else that's out there. I did make
yeah.
it, but I remember that I freaked out.
Yep. I remember one time coming back from work and coming home, and there was a snowplow on a curve, and I
Mhm.
saw it just start to slowly slip into me as I was passing it. So
Oh,
yeah, I've said a couple of those prayers. Whew.
please help me.
Please, Lord.
Oh man. So how many years then were you there in Alaska?
5 total, and I worked almost 5 for the state troopers. So
Man, and then you come back home.
yeah.
And when you came back and you applied, were you applying for the director already, or did you have like a supervisor position and then you moved up?
No, I you know what? I left Alaska as a supervisor. I came
Mhm.
back here entry level. I started from the bottom again. So I was just a regular dispatcher when I came back home. So
Had there
yeah.
had there been a lot of changes from when you were there before, or was it still kind of familiar, nothing new, maybe some new faces?
There had been some policy change and
Mhm.
some equipment upgrades, so there was a learning curve for sure, but a lot of it was still very much the same. Um, you know, when I worked here as a dispatcher, and then I left and stayed on part time. We went through a couple of directors. It was really hard, and the directors weren't always the greatest, and so that was a really rough time for our center. So it did start good and start kind of how I used to remember it, and then it kind of changed.
Mhm. What was something then, I guess, when you came back and all, what was one of the things that really that made you wanna move up and become a director and make changes, be part of those changes and all? Was there just different things that were happening there, stuff that you were seeing? Was there a certain call or just your passion for the job?
I think it's twofold. I was seeing a lot of people who had been here since I had left, um, that didn't love it anymore and didn't want to be here anymore. And they had super valid reasons for feeling that way. They were beat down and they were tired. And I saw people who I just had so much admiration for and so much love for just have all of the fire stripped out of them. And so, when I was considering this job, it posted twice before I even applied for it, because I was like, I don't want that stress in my life. But like I tell them all the time, I do this for them. They're my only reason. They're always my reason. They were the only reason I applied and the only reason that I stick through it, because just to see them grow and change and excel and be that fiery, passionate dispatcher again, that makes all the difference for me. So
Right. Now, from your time in the beginning there and your move and then your time back, are there any calls that you've taken that have just kind of stuck with you?
well, I posted a call for I Am 911 Day. We talked a
Mhm.
little bit about a call that affected me. Um, I I talk about a man who came to a party of military members, who were cleaning a gun and kind of playing with a gun while they were intoxicated. One man shot the other man. In the midst of all of this, my caller was trying to get the gun away from the person who had done the shooting. He was extremely upset and thought he was going to get kicked out of the military, and ended up completing suicide on the phone with me. The whole reason that kind of sticks with me is because I really had a pull to speak to him during that call, but I had such a great caller who was giving me all the information, saying everything I was telling him to say, watching my victim and giving me status on the victim. So my training was stick with your caller, but that little piece of me thought, you know what, I could talk to this guy and have him put the gun down. I could fix it. And when I left that call, I carried he's dead because of you. I carried that for years. I remember after that call, I was the shift supervisor that night. And I remember sitting at that station and watching investigators take that poor kid's mother back to question her, and hearing her cry down the hallway. And in my head, the story in my head was, that's your fault. That's your fault. That kid died because of you, because you didn't talk to him. And so, that's one call that I think, amongst a lot of others, I've taken an officer, two officer involved shooting where they died. Those are calls that I've become more vocal about, because I really feel like, Ricardo, you do amazing work opening up that door for us to tell our story. But I think that we've got to start putting a face to it too.
Mhm.
It's average gals and sinners like me who have these stories to tell. And I think that's how we make ourselves relatable to new hires, and to show them that you can stick it out. It's tough right now for you. And I know that this is hard, but look at me. I've been where you are, and I can tell you that it gets better. And
Right.
there's ways for you to get better. I just think the same couple of people are telling their stories. And I just really, really encourage folks to, if they can lean into that and lean into that hard place and tell their story and be brave. I think that that's how we start combating some of the turnover in our centers. I just do. I think we're too quiet about what's happened to us and what we've done to overcome it.
Right. And it takes stuff like what we're doing right now. This is one of the big reasons why um I wanted to do this show on video as well, to be able to put a face to those who are behind all of these calls, those who make up the I Am 911 movement, those that are, and lack of a better way to put it, within the trenches of 911, taking all of
Yeah.
these phone calls. When a month after I had started the I Am 911 movement, I started Project I Am 911, where I was putting pictures of people in the dispatch center and, showing themselves as part of the I Am 911 movement. Those who have shared these stories, or I Am 911, this is me. Those are out there as well with those stories. And you're right. We need to put more of a face to all of this so that people understand more what it is that 911 dispatchers and call takers do. That they're not just answering the phone, that there is way more to this than what people think. There's way more to
Yeah.
this. And
And to have somebody tell you that having a heart and having an emotion is okay. I think that's where I maybe got jumbled up a little bit. Is I always took it as we could never have feelings and we could never be a human and robot, robot, robot. And human hearts are just not built that way. That's something I say a lot. I think it's important to not only put a face to the story, but also to reassure people it's okay if you feel sad about that. You should. That's what normal people would feel. So,
right. Yeah, exactly. It's okay to not be okay.
yeah,
I think the stigma is going down. It is going
agreed.
down. It is
Yeah,
definitely going down. So the past few years, it has really started, to go down. And like I always say, it's a new day. It's a new day, and people are talking about it. People are sharing it. People are putting a face to it, and it's out there, and people are learning. And the best part of it is that people feel like they're not alone.
but I hope you understand that that started with you. You did that. Like you did that. You fixed that for me. And you made that okay for me to tell people. And you made that okay for me to share. Um, it's really important to me that people understand that we're humans doing a human job, and no other person out there for me, and I'm sure for others, ever told me that that was okay, except for you. So when you ever feel like people don't appreciate what you do, you always think of Roxy Van Gundy, because you're aces in my book. So
Thank you. You're make me break down as well. Oh man.
serious face,
Thank you.
serious.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that more than you know. It's this all started with me not having really someone to talk to myself. And it was hard for me to get these stories out. And it was therapeutic for me to write them down and get them out to anybody who wanted to read them, those who wanted to learn more about it, those who were in the field, who were working with me
Yeah.
to learn more, because we didn't talk about it. And I was one of those who would bury these stories until it finally started to build up, and just finally I had to get it out. And then doing this, what we're doing now, even more therapeutic to do it. And I thought, if it helps me, it's got to help others as well. And that's what sharing all of these stories has been, that power of storytelling, and showing everyone what it is that you do, and that you're not drones,
No,
that you're living through this, and that it's okay. And it's finally changing, and it's awesome. It's amazing.
it is. It is.
It is really, really good. Um, this has been excellent to have you on.
I'm so glad we made it work.
I know, finally, we were
Yeah.
finally able to do this and get your story out there. We probably have a part 2 in here somewhere, because there's probably a lot more that we could talk about. A lot of the stuff that you get into, the group that you're a part of as well, the 911 Wonder Women. There's
Yeah.
so much stuff that's going on with that and what they're doing. And some of the stuff that I've heard about what you're doing as well. I was actually in the group for a short amount of time because I was helping them with a few of their things that they were adding, like some images and a bunch of different stuff. So I was on there, for a little bit. I didn't check in there a lot, but I would see stuff go on there every now and then. And yourself and a few other people, I saw they were making these powerful posts. And I thought, man, that is a wonderful group right there. And then, well, I ended up splitting from the group because
Because you're a boy.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't want anybody to feel uncomfortable either, thinking, well, the trust tree,
Sure,
So,
sure. I think it's a great group to have some honest conversations.
right.
I'm all about Tyra Morris. He is amazing. And I think that he said something once that really struck me is we need to have tough conversations before people have them for us. And
Right.
911 Wonder Woman group has been just this great outlet of tough conversations that we've been able to have in an honest and non-confrontational way. We can get ideas from each other. So I think that we've really hashed out some big things that I don't think we could do in normal Facebook groups. So
Yeah, I agree with you there. Now, going into the wrap up of this episode, we talked about a lot of different things. But let's go with this part. When you're talking about um, difficult conversations, what's some advice that you have for those who are watching and listening right now to have those difficult conversations in their centers, because they're ones that are needed and ones that people don't always have, and then nothing ever changes. It gets to that, well, it's always been that way type thing, but you have to have that difficult conversation. So in your experience and being a director, being part of these groups, in this conversation that we've had today, what's some advice that you have for those who are watching and listening to have those difficult conversations?
I think it's really, really vital to have positive capital in your bank before you have a potentially negative conversation. Because I feel like if someone comes to you and wants you to get to know them, you need to take that time to do it, because when you have to have a difficult conversation with that person down the road, it's way less dramatic, way less confrontational. I also would say hold people accountable, even your friends. I come from a center where all of the people that I supervised were my friends at some point and coworkers. And so they know that I have an expectation, and there is friend Roxy and there is boss Roxy. And, I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to say something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just being consistent in holding folks accountable and pushing them outside of their comfort zone and continuing to challenge them to be better people. I say a lot, if you have an interaction with someone, I do this too, and it's poor, circle back, and say, hey, Ricardo, I know we talked earlier and that didn't really quite go how I wanted it to go. Be humble enough to admit when maybe you didn't have a tough conversation correctly. But I just really feel like having that positive bank of interactions is always just the number one thing to make a negative one go well.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on. It was a lot of fun, and I hope we can do this again. This was good.
For sure.
Excellent. I will be right back with you. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, rather, you can email us, and that is going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. This broadcast is sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy, and this show will always be free. However, if you're looking for any I lost my thought. If you're looking for any bonus content, the early ad-free episodes, access to those, discounts to the store, swag, t-shirts, the behind-the-scenes series that I'm doing, as well as the Singing Badly in My Car. I posted a lot of those this past weekend, Singing Badly in My Car, and some updates on some new items that are coming to the store. Those are all going to patrons first. You can check it out over at patreon.com/WTT podcast. Again, I wouldn't be able to do everything that I'm doing without patrons, those who support and listen and watch, as well as the sponsors. So thank you all very much for that. I appreciate it more than you know. This episode can be viewed on Facebook as well as YouTube. And then for audio podcasts, you can hear it 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. And one last thing, if you haven't done so yet, make sure to go to withinthetrenches.net/conference so that you can register free for the Dare to Be Great fall virtual conference. Have a good one, everyone.